Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and MKUltra. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at 2013's Banshee chapter. Banshee chapter follows a journalist as she tries to find out what happened to her friend when he goes missing after taking an experimental drug. Her search takes her down a strange journey with military secrets, strange radio messages, and just maybe something from beyond. Before I jump into the review, I just wanted to thank my patron LS Gregor for selecting Banshee chapter for me to review. I'd never heard of it before, and I'm always excited to check out new horror movies. Banshee chapter was written and directed by Blair Erickson, who is new to feature films, with this being his directorial debut. But Erickson is an innovative creator in the technology field with a background in 3D interactive experiences and augmented realities. Banshee chapter was actually filmed in 3D to be viewed through the Oculus Rift, which I think would be pretty crazy. Banshee chapter takes two very distinct and intricate histories and combines them, one being the murky government secrets and heinous actions of the MKUltra project, and the other being the horrifying world of H.P. Lovecraft's From Beyond. It's definitely a movie that is easier to grasp if you have some sort of knowledge of both of those things going in, but you won't be completely lost without knowing what those are. To keep it really short, MKUltra was a long-running project performed by the CIA from 1953 to 1973 involving the use of hallucinogenic drugs. Basically, they were trying to figure out what sorts of chemicals could be used to interrogate and torture US enemies and possibly even control minds. Test subjects were put through extreme physical and mental torture while on psychoactive drugs like LSD and DMT. A lot of subjects didn't know what they were actually signing up for, and some even faced permanent cognitive and memory damage from both the drugs and the intense electroshock treatments that they went through. It's really fucked up, and I don't really have time to get into it in great detail, but you should definitely look it up for yourselves. It's very interesting. From Beyond was a short story written by H.P. Lovecraft in 1920. The story follows an unnamed narrator and his experiences with a scientist who creates an electronic device that emits a resonance wave, which stimulates an affected person's pineal gland, allowing them to perceive planes of existence outside the scope of our accepted reality. The narrator becomes aware of a translucent, interdimensional world that overlaps our own. He witnesses hordes of horrifying monsters, and it turns out that the resonance wave works both ways, and the creatures are also able to see him, and they are not above attacking and devouring humans when they get the chance. A ton of movies were inspired by From Beyond, such as The Endless, The Mist, The Void, Stranger Things, and of course, From Beyond. So Banshee chapter obviously isn't the first movie to utilize this concept, but I think its combination with MKUltra and American counterculture gives it a very unique feeling that I haven't seen before. Combine that with its interesting cinematography, and it is a very distinct film, but distinct doesn't necessarily mean great. Banshee chapter is sometimes a found footage film, but then switches to a typical omnipresent view, but it is still shaky and almost unsure of where to look, the way a camera person would. The camera work is what will probably turn away some people from the movie from the very beginning, but people who stuck around till the end seem to be pleasantly surprised, as Banshee chapter has a 77 and 42 on Rotten Tomatoes, so there's a bit of a split between critics and audiences, so it probably isn't a movie for everyone, but considering it was only made for $950,000, I'd say it's at least worth a watch. So why don't we go ahead and get into it? Better adjust our shortwave radios because it's time to join the Banshee chapter. The film starts by introducing us to James Hirsch, a young journalist researching the MKUltra project, as appropriated footage of people like Bill Clinton, former CIA Director Stansfield Turner, and an MKUltra chemist discussing and denouncing the project plays, as well as several fictional doctors straight out of one of those Discovery Channel alien documentaries. James explains that a drug used in the project called DMT-19 had a similar effect on all of the patients. It would reportedly put them in contact with an unknown entity. James's friend Rennie asks him if he would take the drug if he had the chance, and we meet our protagonist Anne, played by Katia Winter from Dexter and Sleepy Hollow. In voiceover, she explains that she and James went to school together and were very close, but he has recently gone missing. We cut to James and Rennie, and they've now gotten their hands on DMT-19, and James is going to ingest it. He slings back the chemical, and after a little while, both James and Rennie hear bizarre music coming from the radio. The music occasionally turns into a very creepy voice repeating various numbers and letters as they head downstairs. A very scared James tells Rennie that something is coming towards the house, and a shadow crosses by the window. The camera cuts in and out the way they only do in movies as Rennie heads outside following a trail of blood, ultimately finding James looking, well, probably not good. A title card leads us into footage of Rennie being interrogated about the incident, and Anne says nobody could tell her what happened to him, although the police suspect Rennie murdered him, but Rennie also disappeared shortly after the interrogation. In their final collaboration, Anne plans to find out just what happened to James. She arrives at his home, which still looks the same, and heads upstairs when she hears a floor creak. She rifles through his composition book research, eventually finding a note from the people who sent him the drug. They refer to themselves as his friends in Colorado, and are excited to hear his findings. Photos remind her of some romantic tension between the two before she hears the front door slam, but nobody is around and she gets out of there. She heads to a TV repair shop where she meets with Henry Cale to learn about shortwave radio broadcasts. The radio enthusiast recognizes the broadcast as a number station. Number stations are shortwave radio stations of unidentified origin which usually broadcast artificially generated voices that read streams of numbers, words, letters, backwards music, or electronic code. So in real life, these number stations are typically believed to be ways for government spies or officials to send code to each other without being traced. The only way to hear the message would be able to know exactly what station to be on at exactly what time, and then you'd still have to break the code even if you do hear it. But for the point of this movie, they are a bit more ambiguous than that. Henry shows her the area his radio buddies have heard the call she played, deep in the Black Rock Desert of Nevada, and she'll need to be out there between 3 and 5 a.m. to possibly hear the station. Then she surprises him by asking about his time at the NSA, which he doesn't want to talk about. She heads out to the desert, and while she waits for the transmission, she admits to herself James was more than a friend, and wonders if she was in love with him. Fuck that sappy shit though, cause there's a scary broadcast coming through. It's the usual music box sound and repeating voice, and Anne realizes the signal is quickly getting stronger. She looks around with her flashlight and glimpses something coming towards her. She gets the fuck out of there in a hurry. She's at work the next day when her coworker Olivia recognizes the phrase "Friends in Colorado." It's the title of a book by Thomas Blackburn, an infamous counterculture novelist with a long criminal record, including attempted drowning. So of course Anne calls him up under an alias that night, but it doesn't go quite as planned.
Have you read my latest book?
Which one?
The one called Go Fuck Yourself.
She does have a VHS tape she took from James's house though. The video is documentation from the MKUltra experiments at a location called Chamber 5, and we watch a man called Patient 11 be restrained and injected with DMT-19. The lights are turned off and the man claims he can hear voices all around him. Patient 11 whispers N1, N2, H2, O7, C11, and announces they are here before being pulled into the darkness. Next is footage of Patient 5, who was a corpse. The chemical they are injecting people with wasn't made in a lab, it came directly from the human pineal gland in the brain. She brings this news to Olivia, who is mildly interested at best. She wants to know more, but the final 30 minutes were deleted. Anne wants to meet Blackburn as she is certain he gave James the DMT-19. She heads to a bar near Blackburn and sure enough he shows up. I was surprised to see Blackburn is played by Ted Levine, otherwise known as Buffalo Bill. She immediately pounces on him with her fake alias and they sit together. He rambles about the horror of technology and tells her his image is just that, an image, but he does invite her to join him in testing some chemicals this weekend. She roams his house and admires his strange decor and his long list of novels. Blackburn introduces Anne, going by Sarah, to his friend and drug creator Callie, who has a PhD in chemistry and is all about freedom and positive energy, baby. Blackburn pours them some DMT and knocks it back, but Anne disposes of hers while he isn't looking. They have a whiskey chaser and wait for the effects to kick in. He asks Sarah how she feels about liars, saying he can't stand those who are bad at it. He knows exactly who Anne is, that she threw the drink in the trash, and the DMT-19 was actually in the whiskey she just drank. She calls Olivia and leaves a voicemail and finds Callie staring at the window. She says something is coming and it can see her, and cue the number station. Anne finds the radio playing it, but runs back upstairs when Callie screams. She says she saw it looking at her through the window, and now it's coming inside through the back door. We haven't had a jump scare in a while, so Anne heads to the back door to investigate. But there's nothing there. Psych. She runs back upstairs and tells Thomas it's in the house, but he thinks they're just hallucinating. Callie tells him it wants to wear them, and when he hears a noise, he believes them. He opens the door and sees the creature and is finally on the same page as the women. The power goes out and Callie is spewing guts quite literally. Thomas and Anne wake up and Callie is gone. They aren't certain what they experienced was real, but they think the drug has worn off by now. Anne gives him a couple good punches for drugging her, but a creepy static has them quickly leave the house. Blackburn wonders if the government is using the chemical for mind control, and we get more MKUltra footage, which I believe is part of the final 30 minutes that was deleted off the tape that Anne didn't get to see. We see a woman called Patient 14 being injected with the substance. The lights shut off and the woman starts screaming and the electricity in the facility goes out. Patient 14 is free from her restraints and the doctors try to find her, and boy do they find her. Patient 11 is there too and tells the doctor it came through as she shrieks and spews blood. Somewhere in the desert, Anne asks again if he knew James. Blackburn remembers James and says Callie made a batch for him because he was polite and used his real name. She shows him his picture and tells him he is missing and presumed dead, and she wants to find out why. Blackburn makes light of it all, as the government has been doing horrible things to citizens from its very inception, and this is probably no different. She asks how Callie got the recipe, but Blackburn never asked, but he does know where she lives. Ah, lumpy face! And Blackburn bloody eyes. Time to go. They reach Callie's house, and Thomas seems to be okay, or at least not spewing blood, but he's got a killer headache. He tells Anne the chemical is like a catalyst. It turns the mind into a receiver and lets them in. He doesn't know for sure, but he can just feel it. Blackburn gives her a radio, which of course he uses to tell her about H.P. Lovecraft's From Beyond, but Blackburn wonders if it wasn't all fiction. She finds Callie's house and it looks like someone has been there recently. The place is completely empty aside from a surveillance camera and the hatch to her underground lab. And Callie has pieces of brain laying around, and she located Chamber 5, the lab where they conducted the experiments on the footage. She hops on Callie's computer and there is an audio recording about brain juice extraction, which is interrupted by a voice repeating those letters and numbers, which seem to be chemical formulas. Anne realizes the CIA didn't come up with this formula. They were informed of it by these creatures, and it does in fact turn your brain into a receiver for them. She gets into Callie's security system and sees this Slender Man looking thing make its way through the house and down into the basement. But that happened 8 minutes ago. Yikes. Better just slowly walk up the stairs and oh shit, time to run. She makes it back to the car and they once again get the fuck out of there. During a pee break, Anne tells Blackburn they have to go to Chamber 5. She knows it's the source of the signal as she's seen things at every location near it even before taking the drug. Blackburn confesses to her he didn't actually give her the drug, the whiskey was clean. He thinks she should just go home and take her chances, but she knows it will come after her regardless. As they head out, we get more MKUltra footage. They are retrieving DMT-19 from the now dead Patient 14, but her brain still has an electromagnetic charge, which corpses should not have. They measure the activity and it is off the charts, which might explain her strangling you, Doctor. Our unlikely duo reaches Chamber 5, and despite his bleeding eyes, Blackburn is ready to fuck shit up and grabs a gas can to burn whatever they find, and of course his handy dandy pistol. They reach the building, which is an old fallout shelter, and head inside. The writing on the wall confirms their location, and they find the one-way mirror the footage was filmed from. Their search continues, and they find a ton of radio equipment hooked to some sort of tank, and it turns out something alive is inside the tank. The transmitter turns on and the number station begins broadcasting, and Blackburn realizes it wanted them to come here. Anne looks for the gas and sees the creature has followed them here. Thomas shuts the door, but he starts bleeding and convulsing, and after apologizing to Anne, shoots himself in the head to prevent his body from being taken over. The creature starts banging on the door, and Anne hides in a locker like it's alien isolation as the creature immediately finds her. The voice asks Anne to come back as she runs, and she is able to find the gas can. Gotcha. She makes it back to the room and smashes the glass of the tank and pours the gas in as the voice asks her to stop and the creature pounds on the door, but Anne prevails and lights the tank creature up. She wakes up and both creatures appear to be dead, but on closer inspection, it's revealed the one that's been following her was whatever was left of James. She cries in the dark over her lost friend / love interest. She leaves Chamber 5 to find its morning, and this is where I thought the movie would end, but not quite. Olivia arrives at the sheriff's office where Anne is being held in a DARE-funded interrogation room. They don't think she'll be charged with anything, but the police obviously have some questions. Olivia also tells her the video forensic team was able to recover the lost footage on the tape. Anne tries to explain what happened, and Olivia tells her to come up with a different story as the police will never buy it. She asks if she's certain Blackburn didn't drug her and also if she found the remains of Rennie, which she did not. She consoles Anne as the music box starts playing over the intercom. Anne starts banging on the door as the numbers start coming in, and she turns to see Olivia has been taken over, which is again where I thought the movie would end, but not quite. We get a little more footage of patient 11 as he is going through horrible electroshock torture. The doctors discuss the damage they've done to him, saying he'll have effects for the rest of his life, so they electroshock him more to wipe his memory and plan to dump him in the desert, not caring what kind of effects the DMT-19 could have on him in the future. He was a grad student volunteer at the university, and his name is Thomas Blackburn. As the credits roll, we get another look at Blackburn's books, and if you look closely, you'll see one is titled I Am Number 11. So that's Banshee chapter. Before I get into my thoughts, let me go through a quick recap of things, because there's a lot of stuff that's left ambiguous in the film, but there actually are more answers than appear on first sight. The most frequent question I saw people ask was, what was in the tank? The tank creature was patient 14, the woman we saw be injected with DMT-19 and eventually be taken over by the entity. My guess is the doctors were able to contain her and at some point put her into that tank. It seems the human body one of these things is wearing deteriorates and transforms with time, so the skull-like face we see in the tank makes sense. It's from this tank that the entity, with the help of the CIA, was able to broadcast the number station. I believe the creatures are separate entities, but I might be mistaken about that. It's my understanding that when James took the chemical, it opened his mind up to Patient 11, and then Patient 11 was able to broadcast James to the other interdimensional creatures like it, and one of those took him over. So I do think that the entities have some sort of hive mind or shared consciousness, but again, I'm not really sure. The other big question in the film is how come people like Rennie and Olivia were taken? It is very subtle and never outright stated in the film, but the effect of the chemical can be transmitted through human touch. As soon as Rennie touched James and Olivia touched Anne, the broadcast started coming in. It's a bit unclear on how and when a person can be taken over. I don't know why it didn't try to take over Anne in Chamber 5. It clearly tried to take over Blackburn, so I don't know why it wouldn't try her afterward. It's a fun but relatively unnecessary little twist to have Blackburn be Patient 11. The damage caused by the government left him so subconsciously distrusting of it. The title of his book is a fun Easter egg, but I don't think it means he remembered his time in the lab. If anything, he probably saw related images through his dreams or something like that. But it seems pretty clear his memory was wiped, and I don't think it all came back. I definitely enjoyed Banshee chapter more on the second watch. The first time through, I was focusing on getting used to the filmography and all of the dialogue and jargon, and I missed a lot of the small details. This could be seen as a bad thing, but I probably would have watched it a second time through even if it wasn't for the channel. What the movie has going for it most are its scares. They are technically jump scares, but they are better paced and thought out than usual. You either know they are coming way ahead of time and that build-up really intensifies as you wait, or they come out of absolutely nowhere and catch you off guard. The movie makes great use of darkness. I love to see a good monster on screen, but if you want to keep me up at night, have something hide in the dark. I do wish the movie capitalized a bit more on the moments where the monster is seen. The shots of it are always just a second or two long and either shrouded in darkness or look a little bit goofy. I'm sure that mostly had to do with the small budget, but that also affected other portions of the movie as well. The footage from Chamber 5 just doesn't look authentic. If they were able to shoot these scenes on 16mm or something, it would have just elevated it to another level. The found footage, shaky cam cinematography was strange. I'm still deciding how I feel about it. Part of me hates it because it kind of feels like the director just couldn't make up his mind on whether he wanted it to be found footage or not, but part of me also loves it because of how strange and off-putting it is visually. It's almost sickening at times, and knowing the movie was made for VR, that makes total sense. This would really immerse the viewer and almost have them wobble along with this horrifying world they find themselves in. If any of you have Oculus Rift, please go watch Banshee Chapter and let me know what it's like. There are a few loose ends and plot holes. It seems wildly unrealistic for the CIA to just leave an abandoned military base with a dangerous creature inside completely unprotected for some random person to come across. The Anne-James dynamic fell a bit flat for me, but I get there needed to be a reason for her to pursue this so hard. We just didn't get to know James enough though. I do think all of the actors do a good job, but Ted Levine steals the show. Thomas Blackburn was mostly inspired by Hunter S. Thompson, an acclaimed author credited for inventing gonzo journalism. He was a very entertaining character and felt like he was almost plucked right out of the 70s. All in all, Banshee Chapter is a very interesting little film. At times it bites off more than it can chew, but it does succeed at creating some solid scares. If you're able to get past the visuals of it all, you might just have some fun with it. Once again, big thank you to LS Gregor for selecting Banshee Chapter for me to review, and thank you for being my patron. And remember, if you join my Patreon, you too can pick a movie for me to review. Well, that's about it. Next week we'll be jumping back into the Child's Play franchise with Child's Play 3. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Banshee Chapter. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of my horror reviews. If you want to support the channel further, you can go follow me on Instagram or check me out on Patreon. Thanks, y'all.